Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study. Before we begin, can you join me in a word of prayer? The dear Father in heaven, we are so grateful that we can gather together each morning and open your word and receive light for our feet. And we pray, Lord, that as we study today, that you can give us a clear understanding of the truths that we are handling. We know that this light is given to bring conviction and power to our lives, to show us our sins and the power to forsake them. And Lord, that we can also share these truths with others. Give us wisdom. Be with each person. May your angels watch over them. And may you guide us into all truth is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, good morning again. Now, you can see this is the chart we were looking at yesterday. So this chart incorporates the 1,533 days that Colin had presented on Sabbath, along with the 186 days from July 18 to January 20th, 2021. Now we can see that there's also 187 days to January 21st, 2021, which is when the School of the Prophets was sold. And so I don't think we can ignore either of these, that these are both significant. Now, the 1533 days before Biden's inauguration goes back to Trump's election, when Trump is declared president of the United States, November 9th, 2016. Now, the other thing is that we have another period of 1,533 days, and that's from January 14th, 2017 to March 27th, 2021. So this is a period that Jeff marked, right? Well, he marked the March 27th and the March 27th, 2020 and the March 27th, 2019. So these are all part of these structures. And there's more here. There's the parallel in our history with Samuel Snow's letters, with that June 9th to November 9th, 2019. So there's lots more to this structure that can be placed in here. So what I wanted to do was to bring out the 1533s. And so we have these two 1533 days that create a type of prophetic mirror, right? So if we go from November 9th to January 14th, that's going to be a period of, I can't remember the number of days, I figured it out. So it's basically around 70, it's not even 70 days, it's 60 some days. Let me see how long that is. I should actually have a chart with all these different dates in them. So if I go from November 9th, 2016, I've got some of these dates in here already. And I go to January 14th. Yeah, 65 days. Okay. So is there any significance there? So if we're going to take these, this prophetic mirror of the 1533, and we're going to say from November 9th, or this, to January 14th, 2017, so 2016 to 2017, is going to be 65 days. So is that significant in any way? So this will be true at the end of this prophetic mirror as well. Oops, I didn't, yeah, I got that right. So then we know 1,533 days is also 219 weeks. So I'm just going to put that in there. Yeah, so we can take the 65 years for the start of the prophetic mirror, right? And also the end of the prophetic mirror, and the 65 days from the first day of the first month to Pentecost, right? So 65 becomes the symbol. Now we also had the 65 days in Colin's study, dealing with his prophetic mirror in his Trump prediction, right? So if we remember that, and he had divided it up into 46 days and 19 days, right? So there was more to it as well. But the fact that we have a prophetic mirror here of 1,533 days with the two periods of 65 days at the beginning and the end, we would have to say that this helps confirm or establish that this prophetic mirror is real, that it's not imaginary, right? It's not just a coincidence. Now, we know that the one relates to Trump, right? The November 9th, 2016, and the connection to Biden. It also has this July 18th in there. And this 186 days. So the first day of the first month to the 10th day of the seventh month. But we have that same symbol in the 186 days dealing with the July 4th to January 6th. Right. So we have that in there as well. So you can see how these relate to each other. They both, in a sense, become symbols of October 22, the 10th day of the seventh month in 1844. Now, what I added to this that wasn't in the diagram yesterday is the November 9th, 1989 to March 27th, 2019. So that's a period of 1,533 weeks. Now, it's an inclusive count, but the 1,533 weeks obviously can relate to the 1,533 days that we're going to see from this January 14th, 2017, 1,533 days to March 27th, 2021. And we already had March 27th, 2020 in there with the 100 days of prayer, right? That were going to give us July 4th with the 186 days. That's going to begin a period of 10 days of prayer that's going to end on January 16th, which is going to divide the 777 chiasm into 433 and 340. So 434 and 343 days. So that's a whole other study there, but we can see here that this 100 days of prayer has this March 27th date. The 1,533 weeks also gives us this March 27th, 2019 date. And that's the center of October 13th and September 7th, those Lambert Church, and I was at Warburg Church and it's going to be Jeff's last presentation at Lambert Church where I do these calculations. So in October 13th, 2018, I'm going to have, so I mean, I could put those in there. Maybe I'll do that this way. Just bring these over here. And I'll just put these here as these smaller ticks. Right, so we got here. And that's going to be October 13th. So I'll do it in sort of abbreviated way. So we'll just go. Right. So that's where I'm going to count. That's going to be at Lambert Church, and I'm going to do this count and arrive at 391 days to, oops. And this one's going to be right. So that's going to be 63 days before November 9th, right? So the center date there is this March 27th, 2019 date. So it's 329, I think it's 164 and a half days or something on either side of this. Okay, so that kind of makes sense. So we can see this March 27th date in 2019. This is something that I noticed on September 7th, 2019, when I was watching from Warburg Church, watching what Jeff was presenting as the last presentation at Lambert Church, right? And he's going to be showing that the Omega is in apostasy. And we also have this March 27th date that's the center of these March 27th, right? So we have March 27th, 2021, which we had established as part of our 777 structure. It's going to be 252 days after July 18th. And so you can see here, when we put the 65 days there, we have 186 days to January 20th. But we're also marking, let me see here, how's this working? So if we put this here, so that's going to be November, yeah. So the 1,533 days, I think Collins is an inclusive count. I'm trying to remember if it is. That would make the most sense. Yeah, so it must be. And January 21st, 2021 is a cardinal count. So November 9th, 2016. Yes. Let me see here. I got to make sure I do this right. So we got so when I do this, that's interesting. Yeah, so I'm actually doing an inclusive count. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing. So when I go from November 9th, 2016, it's an exclusive count to January 14th, 2017. So that means I'm counting the dates between those. So we're just going to leave it like it is. It's just simplified. The thing that's rather interesting is if we go from March 27th, 2019. So this isn't easy to see here, but we have something that just shows up once we actually look at these lines. So March 27th to 2019 to March 27th, 2020 is how many days? How many days between these two dates? Anybody know? Okay, so
66.
366. So I'm just seeing if you guys are sharp or not. Because remember, this is a leap year, right? So you're going to have the extra day added here. Okay. How many days between July 4th and July 18th?
You're talking of the same year, or will it be 14?
Yeah, yeah. So it's going to be
Depends.
14 days. If you add 14 to 186, what do you get?
200, no,
Yeah, 200.
I don't know.
Right?
My math is wrong. Okay.
So this is 200 days. And if you add 100 to 200, what do you get?
300.
And you add that to 366, what do you get?
Oh, I see what you're at. 666. Well, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. So I'm just gonna put this in here. This is just so when you go to when you do this count here, this is going to be 666 days. So I'm just going to bring this here. You don't need that there. So you get 666 days. And now that's going to the 666 days is going from March 27th, 2019 to January 21st. So if we went to January 20th, it would be an inclusive count. If we go to January 21st, it is a cardinal count, right? Now, I believe we may have noticed this before, right? So, but not in this structure, right? So is there significance that there's this 666 days to, it'd be an inclusive count to Biden's inauguration and a cardinal count to the selling of the School of the Prophets. So is this significant in this overall structure that we have the 1,533 weeks, then we have the 666 days? Stephen, you should have some comments on that if you're able to. We know there's a relationship between the 1335 and the 666, right? Yeah, I don't know if Stephen's quite, if he's able to comment.
So, sorry, where does it begin?
So we have this 1,533 weeks from November 9th, 1989 to March 27th, 2019. And then we have 666 days to the School of the Prophets being sold on January 21st, 2021 in this structure. Can you see the structure where you are? Are you?
I can see it. So
you can? You can or can't?
I can.
Okay.
So the January. So it just tells me where's the 666 beginning and end again?
The 666, March 27th, 2019. And that's the end of 1,533 weeks from November 9th, 1989. Right? That's 1,731 days is 1,533 weeks, which as a symbol has the 10, 7, and the 31. But and then you have 666 days to January 21st, 2021, when the school.
All right, okay, I see it.
And so there is a relationship between the 1335 and 666 that you've noted. Right?
Well, that's what that related to William Miller. You mentioned he put them together in a sense as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he puts them together because the beginning of the 1335 happens after a period of 666 years.
Yes.
And then these
So you
become
just,
a more complicated structure when we add in the other 666 years. Right. So all I'm saying here is that we then can recognize that this structure is founded in the prophetic periods that this movement already understands. It has elements of the prophetic mirror, the 65 days, right? And it has the 1533 days, which also can represent the 1335, right? But also that's a period of time from August 11th, 1840 to October 22, 1844. But we got two periods of 1535 days. And that's going to connect us to March 27th, as well as the 1533 weeks. But we also get that 666 days. To me, this is the piece de resistance. It's the thing that kind of ties it all together, that finishes off this particular structure. So what does it mean then? I mean, obviously the 6 days comes, it connects the 1533 and the 1335. But what else is it telling us regarding this movement and this message, or interpreting this line? Because what does this line mean? Because we have some dates, right? And we know that these dates exist as parts of structures. We have a prophetic mirror. Prophetic mirror is a significant structure. But if we're going to place an interpretation upon what it means, what do we need to understand this? Is this structure really complete at this point?
In the way that you're asking it, I'd have to say no.
Okay. Yeah, so we know it's not, right? We can put December 25th, 2021 here at the end. And why would I put that there? Why would I not end with this March 27th date? Why am I going to, mark this 273 days? Is that needed for this structure to make sense? What did the 273 days represent? In the context of this, what does December 25th, 2021 represent? And how am I going to tie that in to what else we have? So December 25th, 2021 is a symbol of the Sunday law, right? But there's lots of things that happen there on December 25th, 2021. Stephen is going to notice the 777 years from 457 BC to 321 AD, right? We're going to have Colin have a presentation on the Trump prediction on that date, right? So in order for this structure even to sort of be here, it has to do with Trump, right? So we're going to have his interpretation of how we can understand this whole thing that we're studying goes all the way back to December 25th, 2021, why we're studying it in the first place. So God gave light to this movement on December 25th, 2021. There was also an invitation that was rejected on that date. So there's three kind of significant things about that. Now, of course, the structure could continue to build, but I'm just saying that here we need this happening, right, in order for this whole structure to be complete. Now, notice this structure begins with November 9th, 1989. Now, we know that March 27th, July 18th are part of the 777 structure, right? So really, to make this at all significant or meaningful, we have to complete that part of the structure, right? So we need to have that's why. There we go. So we need to have in here those 63 days to, and I'm just going to do it as abbreviation here. November 9th, 2019, right? Whoops. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So we got that. So that's going to be here. This is going to be 63 days here. You know, this is going to be 391 days from November 9th, 2018. But this is part of that 777 day structure, right? So obviously, you know, I could put that in, but we're very familiar with this. Yeah, you can have 66 days from November 9th, 2016 to January 14th, 2017. So I think he meant, let me see here. I'm just looking in the chat. Yeah, so November 9th, 2016, this is an exclusive count, right? So when I put 65 days here, I'm doing an exclusive count. You could put 66 days, right? So I could put it as 65, 66. Right? Okay. So just, okay, and then it says here, if threes and sixes went continually, it would add up to 2 to okay, can you explain if threes and sixes went continually, it would add up to 22?
I was
100?
just taking 1533 and 666. Like if they had a fraction of a third and a fraction of 2/3, it would just be one more.
Okay, I still don't understand it.
I was just trying to get the relationship between 1533 and 666 is all.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, because it's 2,199, and you're just saying if they were repeated like decimals or whatever, then it would add up. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay. Right. So here at the end with the 65 days is a cardinal count from January 21st to March 27th. But over here at the beginning, this is an inclusive count or exclusive count. Now, at Glen Park, when Jeff presents on Raffia and Paneum, it's going to start on the Friday, which is the 13th, and it's going to go to the Sunday, which is the 15th, right? So he's actually going to finish it Sunday morning. So there is actually some leeway there, but we have the 65 days at the end, and the 666 goes to the January 21st date as a cardinal count, right? So if you went to January 20th, it would be 66 days to March 27th as a cardinal, right? So you can see that there's this things at the beginning, at the end of these structures of this 65 days. But we saw that with Collins too. He had an inclusive count for the 65 days that are going to end on January 11th, 2023. But we're not putting that in here because that'd just be way too messy. Oops, keep doing that. Okay. So we need that November 9th date in there. Now, what does that do then to the meaning of this structure? Because we have the November 9ths. Now, these November 9ths are 30 years, right? We know that. And that's going to be, I think it's going to be how many days? 10,000. That's going to be where we add up 3316 plus 7641. We had that in 10,957 days. Remember, we had that in the story of Jephthah, and then you're going to have it's Jephthah, and they're going to have the shibboleth. That's not Jephthah. Is it Jephthah? Yeah, it's going to be Jephthah. And you have the shibboleth, right? So you take the name of Jephthah and you take the shibboleth and you add them together and you get 10,957, the Hebrew numbers. And that's exactly 30 years. So that becomes significant. So anyway, the point is we have this November 9th date there, 1989, November 9th, 2016, and then we have November 9th, 2019. They're all part of the structure, right? So these November 9ths are all important. They're all related prophetically. Okay? So what does this mean then? Because what Colin is going to do, he's going to take the one period of 1,533 days, the one from Trump's being declared president to Biden's inauguration, and the 186 days from July 18, 2020. And he's going to compare this to Millerite history, the 1,533 days from August 11th, 1840 to October 22, 1844. And then he's going to say July 18th is the first disappointment, because he's going to line that up with April 19th. Right? Now, some of this goes against what he's arguing, because at the time, he's going to make an argument. It's sort of separate. But he's going to say, well, Elder Jeff is come back, and, we're just going to accept that, even though it happens after a date that he marks as the disappointment, the second disappointment. He's going to mark that as January 20th, which we had marked July 18th as the second disappointment and November 9th as the first disappointment. That is, we're going to mark this. We know in this prediction here, this January 14th Glen Park study, when Jeff is going to talk about Paneum, he's going to talk about the pandemic that occurs between Raphia, which we come to recognize as November 9th, and Paneum, which we mark as July 18, 2020, right? So you can see how we can't just simply take part of this line and draw these conclusions, right? That there's more involved. But the question is, what is this telling us about our line at the present time, and how to interpret January 20th? So we see these as mirrors, as structures, the 186 days, both two periods of them, right? Two periods of 1,533 days that tie us to Millerite history. Can we just take one of them and make a declaration of that? Because we can also look at January 6, 2021 as October 22, 1844, because it's the 22nd day of the 10th month on the biblical calendar, and it's connected to this 100 days of prayer and the 10 days of prayer and 186 days, right? So how do we do this, right? I want your input. Well, first, can we just take the one by itself and give it the application that Colin made?
I don't believe so.
Because we have two that give us two that are identical. Now, so we see that what Colin presented is correct, but it's incomplete. Now, we also have the 666 days, right? Connected to the 1,533 weeks. So we can't ignore that. And it puts January 20th and January 21st as connected. That is, what happened with the inauguration of Biden, which we could say is external, is connected to what happened with the sale of the School of the Prophets, which is internal. But also January 6, 2021 is an external event related in prophecy to the United States, because we're going to mark that as the defeat of Persia by Greece, right? In some way, right? So United States is conquered by Greece, by the globalists. So I know the structures become complicated, but we need to know these things. We need to know these things and how they're related, and how do they help us interpret these lines. Now, part of it is all of this is in the studies on the judges, for the most part. There's some little details here that we've noticed that we didn't notice, particularly these two different periods of 1,533 days and how they're interconnected in a prophetic mirror. So any other thoughts about what this can tell us about our lines? Now, we'd have to assume that FFA at the present time is rejecting any of these types of lines. Right? Because on December 6, 2020, they rejected the symbolic use of numbers, and it appears that they're continuing to do so. That July 18th as a date is a deception, right? That was this movement going off course. According to FFA. And that we really have to go back to 2012, retrace our steps, and then just say all of that history, we pretty much can ignore what we taught during then. So Colin's going to be saying, no, we can accept what Jeff is saying now, even though he's rejecting all of these other things. Now, I'm not sure how they reconcile that, but okay, so Angela has a comment. So she says, entering a new paradigm internally and externally, downfall of FFA, the School of the Prophets, meant liberation for us to study for ourselves privately and collectively. So one of the things that we know that had to happen is, because when we studied the book of Judges, we understood that there was basically a culture of just writing people off, right? Wasn't an open, let's study together type of culture. There was a lot of misrepresentations of people that were going on, gossip and rumors and so forth. And a lot of people just following others, right? Within the movement. So there was a lot of party spirit, people following Jeff, people following Parminder. Before that, people were following other movements. And we are seeking to have that stop. That the idea is not to follow individuals. That we have to study for ourselves. So that allowed us to study more freely, right, without the censure that was going on. Because with July 18th, when we were first studying it, they shut that down, within a few weeks of it. And, Jeff had to be the one that revived it, right? That had to be done because we really, as a movement at that time, we couldn't operate separately. We couldn't do that. But now we have the freedom, if you want to put it that way, to study for ourselves. But there's also this external part, the end of Republican US, beginning the globalist takeover, and the repudiation of the foundations by America. And I don't know what PTM is.
Present Truth Movement.
Oh, the Present Truth Movement? Okay. So obviously, yeah, there's a rejection of this message. I mean, part of the problem that I have with all of this, and I've had this problem, of course, ever since being in this movement, is sort of the exclusiveness that occurs. That is, when you find some truth that nobody else or very few other people are looking at, there's this temptation to sort of think, well, we're special in some way. But, I believe that God is using all kinds of people all over the world, that we're not the only ones. But we are understanding things that it appears no one else is understanding. And these are, fairly esoteric. They require a great deal of understanding of all kinds of things: biblical chronology, history, the history of the Millerite movement, even events that are happening exclusively within this movement that people all around the world aren't going to know about. And so we put dates like Jeff presenting at Glen Park Hall, where he's presenting Panium, and we put it as part of a structure. And somebody looking on was like, well, how do I know if any of this is true? And what does this even matter? And why is there this small group who's noticing this? And then we're making claims, in Bible prophecy that, when we get to this and we say, well, when is, and we're saying, well, this is Biden, and we're actually built into that prophecy itself, the people who notice when is, this is pretty tough stuff to take. If I was just, running upon this video on the internet, let's say 20 years ago, with the way that I understood things 20 years ago, I would just dismiss this as a bunch of kooks, right? But we know that we have been moving through history, and we have this understanding being presented to us. And when Colin does a study and he presents something that's true, like this 1533 and the 186, we can recognize that it's significant. But I don't think Colin can understand, and I'm not a criticism of Colin as a person, that he's like doesn't have the ability to understand. But because he doesn't have the knowledge of what this movement has been studying, what we have been studying, that he doesn't have a way to interpret it. Now, we know that normally what we would do is we would take this as a line and mark a period of darkness, a time of the end, arrival of the first message. Now, there's a lot of dates here, a lot more than 7 waymarks. And we also don't have a narrative. We don't have a Bible story that we can place here specifically and say, like we were doing with the book of Judges, to interpret this. But we do have what we studied in the book of Judges in relation to these various dates, right? So we can know some things about what it's saying in the book of Judges about this history, about this study. And what we've done in this study, when we've looked at Daniel's last vision, is we did a thorough job of looking at the different options and all of the relevant passages that we could think of that related to understanding Xerxes as Trump, right? That's why we studied Esther. And we also studied all of the different periods of 7 kings, right? And we looked at then Colin's understanding of Daniel chapter 3. We looked at Daniel chapter 3, Daniel chapter 2. We looked at, in Revelation, well, we looked at Daniel 7, we looked at other things. And then Revelation 12, 13, and 17 that we spent a great deal of time upon. But now, so we want to know and understand this in relationship to when is. That is why we're looking at this. So the question then is, how does what Colin presented and what we are now looking at help us in this study, right? Because remember, if we go all the way back, Colin is going to say, 5 are fallen, 1 is. The 1 is Trump. But we're saying no. That the one that is Biden. Now, Stephen, I don't know if you had time to go over the studies from the last week and yesterday, or the day before yesterday, Sunday. But if you did, do you understand better what we're talking about with the is, when the is, why it's Biden and not Trump?
Maybe not fully. I have to sort of continue to study.
Okay. Yeah. So this is, and when we remember when we started all of this study, we're not going to start with our conclusion and work our way backwards to try to prove it, right? That wasn't the goal. We might say, a spiritual hunch regarding the fact that Trump can't be the next president, or he doesn't need to be the next president. That there was truth in what Colin had presented, but I knew that there was pieces of the puzzle missing that he didn't see back in December 25th, 2021. There wasn't a criticism of him as a person. It was just, I knew that he hadn't studied all that we had studied in examining the foundations, and that we knew we needed to understand the pioneer's view of these things, and that we couldn't just dismiss them, right? That we needed to examine Revelation 12, 13, and 17. So initially, we did a study on the presidents of the United States on Friday nights. And I knew that we had to come back to Daniel 11 more thoroughly, which is what we're doing presently. But a lot of things unfolded within this movement in that period of time that would actually help us to come back and study these things. So we need to know. Okay, so I'm just reading what Angela wrote. We have the Exodus, especially as 1533 figures prominently. That's the year of the Exodus. Liberation from bondage, of private misinterpretations as we travel toward the promised land, heaven. Liberation from one man or woman as in cults, right? And the one thing, that I can say, when we deal with the word cults, of course, that's kind of a misused word. What particularly is a cult depends on your perspective. But the idea is that we individually need to understand truths for ourselves. If you're a Seventh-day Adventist and you just go by what the pastor says, or what, the denomination says, without any understanding yourself, you are in a cult, right? In my definition of it. Now, cult originally just refers to, some kind of religious practices, but, it's come to mean in the colloquial sense, some sort of fanatical movement that's, controlled by some leader or group of leaders. But we know that we need to understand truths for ourselves. And so God has urged us to do so. He scattered God's people at various times, and he's brought in heresies at different times to allow people the opportunity to study truths for themselves, because we can't just depend upon what some person says. And so everything that we're trying to do here is in that regard. But anyway, going back to when is, right? So we're saying that we need to know when is in the 7 kings. And our argument is that it's Biden is rather, it's not as direct and straightforward as just saying, well, here's John and he's in such and such a time. And so when it says 5 are fallen, 1 is, we know exactly when is. But we do know that he does place it within a certain time, within the time where the beast is not, and a time before the 10 kings have given power 1 hour with the beasts, right? They're going to be kings for 1 hour, right? Power is given unto them 1 hour with the beast. So we know it's before then. But then there has to be 7 kings, and we'd have to decide what those 7 kings are. And so we're using this model from all of the other 7 kings. And then we line it up. And so we say, well, the only time it can be true that 1 is, 5 are fallen and 1 is in the time of Biden. But it's only going to be in the time of Biden that can be recognized, right? So that's where I say this, it's rather narcissistic, in that sense. But nobody before then could know when is until we're in the time of Biden. So we have to be brought to that. But when we look at this study of Collins, the question is, how does this help us understand when is? How is this in any way related to the 7 kings of Revelation 17, right? That's the question. Does this give us information that's going to help us to know when is? Because we have this prophetic mirror. So instead of looking at how Colin was looking at it and trying to find when the first and second disappointment is, because we know we have different options here. If we look at January 20th as related to the prophetic year or prophetic mirror, what year is that? Is it 1798? Wouldn't that make more sense to line up January 20th based on these two, this prophetic mirror here? Wouldn't that make more sense to line it up with 1798 instead of October 22, 1844?
I think the concept,
Um,
right?
Okay, Dwight first.
I said, I think the concept is right.
Okay. And then somebody else made a comment?
Stephen, I thought,
yeah, I was just going to say what is the justification?
Well, we have a prophetic mirror, the 65 days. And we're putting January 20th and January 21st together as a pair, right? So there's 1,535 days, either inclusive or ordinal count, from November 9th, 2016 to January 20th, 21st, 2021. And then there's 65 days at the end of this mirror, right? So you got 1,533 days from the Glen Park pandemic prediction right? So the point is we have a prophetic mirror and we have 65 days. And if we're going to say, well, that 65 days is a parallel, one way we could parallel it is saying that January 20th, 21 is 1798 and March 27th, 21 is 1863, right? We could do that.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. It
Okay.
is slightly different now because you had the 2520s. You had that 46-year period was really connecting the 2520s, and then you had 19 years either side.
Yeah, I understand. I understand that it's going to be different, but I'm just saying that we have a symbol that is a prophetic mirror symbol where there is 65 days, right? So yeah, it doesn't line up exactly in the way that the two 2520s do, but it does give us that symbol of 65 days. And so it's when we have at the end of the 1533 days, right? And you have this other 1533 days, right? You have a prophetic mirror. And that prophetic mirror has this symbol of 65. And if we're going to go to the beginning of the 65, it'd be 1798. But I'm just saying, and this is, of course, just one of the ways to look at this. So if this is 1798, and we're going to look at what that represents, it represents different things, right? But one of the things that it represents is a time where a message is coming because of a prophetic marker, right? That it's not necessarily going to mark a disappointment. Just because you have the 186 days from July 18th, it helps us recognize that structure as significant because we have two witnesses. But we can just say that that's a prophetic period, right? Just like the 1533 is. So there's no reason to say July 18th is thus the first disappointment and January 20th is the second disappointment. It's insufficient information to draw that conclusion. But if we see the prophetic mirror, we can say that, well, here in 1798, it is true that 5 kingdoms are fallen, one is, and one is yet to come, right? So we can apply the riddle to, and the way that I look at it is that the riddle of the 7 kings comes from Revelation 13 with the 7 kingdoms where 5 have passed, one is, right? 5 are fallen, one is. Well, we know the beast that was and is not, it is not in 1798, right? Does that make sense? So that means we can take this when Biden becomes president as is. Right? Even if you just wanted to say that the 5 kings are the 7 kingdoms, right? And that we're making a parallel like Colin is. And this was one of the things that was brought up at the time when Colin presented it on December 25th, 2021. I can't remember who brought it up, whether it was Daniel Fontenot. I think it was Daniel Fontenot. And he was trying to say, well, shouldn't you have a parallel between the 5 are fallen and the 1 is with the kingdoms, right? That was what he was implying in his question. It wasn't as clear as that. But you can see then, as of January 20th, 2021, or even back to January 6th, because these are also prophetic mirrors, right? The 186 days. And the way that we mark that, the end of July 4th to the beginning of July 18th is 13 days or 18,720 minutes, right? So that would be true if you went to the end of January 6th and the beginning of January 20th, you'd still have that same 13-day symbol, but leave that out for now. can we see then that this parallel makes more sense based upon what Colin has presented? When we start to put it together, that it shows us that the one is must begin on January 20th, 2021. That's when is. Any comments on that?
My thinking it would be maybe December 25th, 2021, when Colin presented that study.
Well, but okay, so when Colin presents it, it's already true that Biden is president and has been president since January 20th, 2021, right? So yes, so when Colin presents it on December 25th, 2021, it's still in the time of Biden. So the one is can't be Trump.
You have there the end of the 777 days,
Yeah.
and in 1798, if that was the time of the end, it's parallel by 1989 to 1991. You have 777 days there.
Mhm.
So you had that connection. And that was one of the suggestions I made, that maybe Trump would have been the one, is because he was 70 years old, 7 months and 7 days when he was the seventh day when he took office as well.
Okay.
So you have
Mhm. So
you have a 777 there in a sense.
yeah, see, I would think that that actually would more support the idea, though, that because this is about a transition in Revelation 13. This is about a transition from the papal beast to the United States, right? Because Revelation 13, even though it's talking about this first beast, but the primary purpose of Revelation 13 is to show the transition from papal Rome to the United States, right? I mean, it's going to show us this history of this beast, but because it has 7 heads and one is wounded unto death, it's bringing us to the time of the wounding of that head and the rise of the second beast. So the line there dealing with Trump and Biden is showing us the same transition, but this time it's going to be from the 5th president to the 6th president. So I understand what you're saying with the 777. The 777 is going to end on December 25th, 2021. But at that time, Trump is not president, right? Biden is going to be president. The other thing that we have there is the 666 that's going to end on January 20th, 2021, right?
Yes, and I had already noticed as well, 266. There's a 666 in Millerite history, and a
Yeah.
777
Mm-hmm.
as well. So
Yeah, so that's also going to help mark the end of Trump and the beginning of Biden, if that makes sense. I mean, here we're sort of paralleling Trump with, the papacy, but there's a reason here. It just has to do with this transition of power from the 5th king to the 6th king. So what you're saying supports as much the idea that Biden is the one that is, if we take into account all the information. Because we know Trump has the 777 attached to him as well, right?
yes,
But he also has a 666 attached to him. So at the end of the 666 days, Biden is president. we can now say that that also parallels 1798. And that just in that symbol of that transition from the papal beast to the United States. Here it's symbolizing from Republican to Democrat. So it's not the same creature, so to speak, but it's the same structure. And it's the 5, the 6, from the 5th to the 6th. So I would say it's supporting that the one is Biden, not Trump. And it's not going to be noticed until after Biden is president. Right? It's first going to really be presented December 25th, 2021. Now, Colin's going to try to backdate it, right? But we can see from the structure here, he can't really do that. He can't really backdate it. Because we're moving through this structure in our understanding. Any other thoughts, Dwight?
Not yet.
Okay. Just your mic was on, so.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was Daniel Fontenot. He said that he was paralleling that it would be the 5th. So if
Yeah.
you're saying Trump's the 5th, Daniel Fontenot was saying it was the 5th. So that would
Yeah.
be like,
Yeah, that was because it's just when Colin's first presenting it, Daniel Fontenot's like, well, and I'm pretty sure it was Fontenot. It should be the same, right? And that was just kind of brushed aside by Colin. But I took note of it. But that's all I did. I didn't draw any conclusions from it, but I took note of it at the time. So to me, this supports what we're saying about, and the other thing is about, if we look at Artabanus and Biden, we definitely can line them up, right? So because we line up Xerxes and Trump. And that makes Artaxerxes the 7th. But in the line that Colin has, is he's going to have, Biden as the 7th, right? He's going to put Trump again as the 8th. And so that doesn't line up with the Persian kings. So if we're going to just take this parallel with the Persian kings and the kings of Judah, and how we have the 8th there with Christ, and the beast is counterfeiting it, this would give us more credence to the is. The question that we have, though, is we can line these up, but then we have to say, how can John be in the place where is Biden, right? That we can talk about it in that sort of present tense. How is John there? And the way that we put John there is with this the beast of chapter 13, the beast that comes out of the sea. This beast has that characteristic where 5 are fallen and 1 is, right? That's going to be the power, the second beast that's going to rise up in 1798 and make an image to the beast. And since this structure gives us that same idea with the 666 days and the 1533 days and the 186 days ending on January 20th, it gives us a parallel for our lines to say, is Biden. It's in the time of Biden that we have to say is. So it's where we are now. So we couldn't have said that before in the present tense, that 5 are fallen, 1 is, when Trump was president. But we can say it when Biden is president. And so this whole structure witnesses to the idea that Biden is the 6th and he's the one that is. And and that it's only understood in the time of Biden. And we know that this movement presented it in the time of Biden. For Colin to try to backdate it, say the one is in the time of Trump, the way that he tries to do that, so how does he try to do that? How does he try to say, well, this is in the time of Trump that the one is? What is his reasoning?
I think, does he connect it to July 18?
I don't remember him connecting it to July 18. I think his main argument, from what I remember, just has to do with his count. Right? That is, he doesn't do anything to say to place John in that time, right? And this is why Daniel Fontenot's argument doesn't really make sense, or it makes sense against what Collins doesn't make sense. Because if you're going to make this parallel to the beasts of Revelation 13 to the heads, even though you're putting them in Revelation 17, the same heads. But if you're going to say, well, there's Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, and then you're going to make this parallel. You're making an application, right? So he's making an application from the seven heads, but then he just has to create a count that's going to make Trump the fifth, right? That's basically his argument. It's nothing to do with July 18th that I saw in any of his studies. It's just simply, we have this count. We're going to parallel it with the kingdoms. And if we start the count at Reagan, then the five are fallen are going to be all the way up to Obama. And then the one that is going to be Trump. That's his whole argument, right? There's nothing else that I saw where he really tries to place where is. His argument comes from the kingdoms and then from the count of the presidents. But that count of the presidents, that's what we saw, that it doesn't work, right? From what we have understood about these lines, we can't make Trump the sixth. The only way we could do that is make Reagan one. But that means Reagan has to line up with Cyrus, and Bush the first with Cambyses, and Clinton with false Smyrnus, right? Bush the first with Darius, and then, well, you'd have to have Obama line up with Xerxes, right? You understand what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't fit. The only way you can make Xerxes Trump is if Cyrus is number one, right? Of the kings of Persia. Because that's how we've lined up the kings of Persia with the presidents. Now, when we originally did this, we just didn't keep counting, right? We took, there shall three stand up in Persia from Cyrus, and then the fourth would be Trump in that count, right? Just because Cyrus is counted as zero. But when we line up the kings of Persia, the kings of Judah, we would have to line them up in this way, especially when we look at the times of the ends with Darius the Mede and Cyrus and Reagan and Bush. You have to place them in this way. So his whole argument, the five are fallen, one is, applying them to the presidents, would have to put Trump as the fifth if we're going to look at it and be consistent. And this would line up with the kingdoms. So that's the reason why I believe that they're going to use that five are fallen, one is, and one is not yet come, is because we have that model already in the heads of the beast of Revelation 13. So, I mean, from my point of view, I think this is settled, but people may still have other objections to it. But I would think this to me, this diagram here in front of us, really illustrates this. with this prophetic mirror. That we have to declare that the one has to be Biden, and it has to be marked as January 20th, 2021. Because it ends 666 days, which is following 1,533 weeks from our time of the end. And it has this 1,533 days from when Trump is made president. So it's all about this transition. But we also have the other 1,533 days recognized by this movement that gives us these 65 days. Whether it's 65 or 66, it depends if it's an exclusive count or a cardinal count. But we also pair together January 20th, 2021, 20 and 21, the Biden becoming president and the sale of the School of the Prophets, which occurs, 187 days after July 18th and is sold for 18.7% below the asking price. And there was another thing there too, dealing with that. So we had all these symbols attached to that. So we can't ignore that there's sort of two events here marking this mirror, one external and one internal. And then we have, the other 186 days as well, which gives us this, this dual, it gives us the October 22 date, but we wouldn't mark July 1st as the first disappointment and January 6th as the great disappointment, right? So just because you have 186 there as a symbol, we have other symbols and they all have to be taken into consideration. So yeah, so we're going to have, and I'll just put it in here because I think probably just helps a little bit to visualize this. We're going to put this $777 days in here. I'll just put that in there. Right. So, we put, Colin's study there on December 25th, 2021, definitely is a waymark in the understanding of all of this. And so I think Stephen's idea that, well, if you're going to put the one is, I know this, somebody looking at this chart and writing one is, but I'm going to put this here, one is. That has to be true then, right? So you couldn't say one is prior to January 21st, 2021, but we are recognizing it on December 25th, 2021. Because that's when that light opens up to us. It's still not completely studied and understood at that time, but we can see that would make sense. So, I mean, it's true since January 20th, 2021. But we're saying that God is showing us this on December 25th, 2021. So I know this takes a lot of thinking, but we've spent time going through this. Is there anything that we can criticize about this diagram? That we can say, well, that's just not correct. I don't see that we can. Right? We could definitely, label these waymarks better so that people know what they are. But I think it clearly establishes what it is we've been trying to find out. That is, how to understand that riddle. So, one of the things we have to decide, I guess, at this point is, are we going to, continue studying Daniel chapter 11? Because I think we're finished with Revelation 12, 13, and 17. Now, I don't know what Colin was really asking me to do. I mean, because I'd said we need to understand Daniel chapter 11. Okay, so Angela says, after labeling waymarks, extension to April 5th, 2030. So I don't know. I mean, definitely we could put April 5th, 2030 in there, but that would require a lot more waymarks to be placed in here to establish that. So I don't quite know what to do about that.
Hey, Theodore, brother Theodore,
Yeah,
he wanted you to go through chapter 11, verse 5 verse.
right.
That's
I
what he told me.
Yeah, because that's what I said I wanted to do, right? But what I don't know is how he thought that that's going to relate to what he is talking about. I think as far as his study, that we've covered that. I still think that we should go through Daniel chapter 11. And that maybe when we start going through Daniel chapter 11, it's going to be similar to when we went through the book of Judges. That we're going to be able to draw these on a line in our history. But I don't know how that's going to happen, like how that line would unfold, right? The only thing that I can think of, so here's me just thinking on my feet, that we know that the end and the beginning are tied together, right? One of the things that happened when Jeff started to recognize that the beginning of Daniel chapter 11 addressed Daniel 11, verse 40 to 41. It addressed our history, that there was a repeat of history going on, right? So when we look at Daniel chapter 11, we know that there's a repeat of history. And so we have, 40 to 45. We had this king of the north, king of the south thing. And Jeff had not considered before, even though there's a lot of the same symbols, that all of Daniel chapter 11 related to illustrating that history. But it first began when we started to look at Raphi and Peniam, right? But even then, we could say it goes back further to when we just started to look at the first few verses, that we could take those and place them as the presidents of the United States, right? Though only in an incomplete sense, only going up to Trump, not beyond Trump. But that's kind of where it started. So, back in 2015, he's going to, notice this in 2016, right? So they're going to make the Trump prediction regarding the Trump. He's going to become the president, possibly, right? And then at the end of 2016, on December, whatever it was, 17th or something like that, Jeff is going to attend the meeting where Chao Tu is presenting Raffia. Okay. So that's going to be, December 17th, 2016. It's on a Sabbath. And then Jeff is going to present a short study about that at Lambert Church. And then he's going to present it in Warburg, Glen Park Road, which isn't Glen Park Hall is not far from Warburg, where I went to church. And so when he presents that there, he's going to deal with Peniam and also the pandemic, right? That's going to come between Raphia and Peniam. is how he places it between those two waymarks, which we didn't have established as November 9th, 2019 and July 18, 2020. Later we did. So we saw that the pandemic came in that history. So there's lots addressing all of that. So what I'm saying is that maybe Daniel chapter 11 illustrates the kings at the beginning, but that each time we go through it, it's going to be showing the history of this movement, just like we did with the book of Judges. So starting at 1989 and going to maybe 2030, or whatever it's going to show us. Okay? So that we need to do this just like we did with the book of Judges. So is that what people want to do? Continue on, even though we finished this Revelation 17, and I think we've answered Colin's study. We've studied that, the kings, the presidents, but we still need to keep studying. So are people on board with that approach? And are we finished with?
Yes.
Okay, so you say yes. And we should be finished then with these lines. I mean, they're going to come up again, but as far as right here having these we're going to have to argue that Biden is the one that is, right? So that's what that's showing us. The one that is Biden. And that comes from all the things that Colin has presented. He keeps providing us with information that when we examine it, shows us these things, right? So Colin wasn't intending to show us this whole prophetic mirror, but we now can see it. Okay. Okay, so if everybody's okay with that, that's what we're going to continue doing in these studies. We'll continue on. Okay, let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, we are grateful for what you have shown us in these studies. And we ask for your continued help in our personal studies, and we pray for others who have been studying, and that all of us can be corrected in our characters and in our understanding. Forgive us for our sins. Help us to trust in you. And we leave all things in your hands. And we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.